and welcome into the program. This is your game plan for retirement with Northwestern Ohio's resource for a common sense approach to planning for our financial, investment, and retirement future. Answers to financial, money-related questions and investment guidance. He is Chris McIntire, president and founder of McIntire Retirement Services, here providing valuable information each and every week. And Chris, now a question that is on the minds of savers and investors is, what does the future look like? And will we be able to have the same expectation for a secure financial future given the political environment and everything that's going on in Washington? Will Washington wipe out our retirement?
Peter, this is a funny topic that you bring up today because, it's hard to have a meeting these days with a client that doesn't bring up, well, what about the election? And it's not necessarily who wins it. It's it's the turmoil, probably from the January 6th of last time. And, I think it might be candidate fatigue as well. I think, most folks were ready to move on from the candidates that we voted for the last time. And we don't have any new choices and, trying to stay politically neutral here on a radio program. But,
here they are again. Same thing all over again, it seems.
Yeah, here we are again. I wanted to vote for somebody completely different than the two choices that we have, and but it is what it is. So, millions of Americans are going to cast a vote one way or another, and let's hope not as many dead people vote this time.
Well, Chris, it is the job of those in Washington, in fact, it's part of our founding documents, to help ensure domestic tranquility. And it seems like they have not been pushing toward that means or ends and that goal. In fact, it seems like the issues that have plagued us, they have continued to put short-term band-aids on long-term problems and issues, and not a lot to address kind of festering problems beneath the surface that seem apparent to all of us.
Yeah, I'm in the business of solving problems. And when you look at our leaders in, let's just say Washington, and we'll stay away from the state side of things here. But in Washington, it's almost, one party has to pit the other party against one another. It's like, rich people are evil, they should pay more. It's like, but they already pay everything, and, and then, with all the race cards that we play, the politics on corporate boards now where, you can't say anything without offending anybody. And I probably already have on this show here, thankfully, we don't, it's not what our goal is by any stretch, but, it is just, it's so hard to operate under these conditions here that, it's very frustrating for, the average investor to say, okay, well, I don't believe in this, and why are they running the company this way? Or why does, BlackRock, for example, not want to give money to oil companies, so to speak, and it's like, isn't their job to make money for investors? Isn't that part of the fiduciary responsibility? And I'm just using that as a very generic example,
Yeah. But I mean, Chris, we'll talk on this program about taxes, legislative risks, solvency, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the national debt, inflation, all things that what goes on in government with financial, fiscal, and monetary policy certainly has impacts on all of those things. These are issues that our government discusses and tries to address. But ladies and gentlemen, if these are concerns on your mind, there is not a lot of control over systemically these issues with any of us individually, but each of us individually do have the ability to formulate a plan to help protect and insulate or isolate ourselves from these variables outside of our control. And that is determining your own destiny. As much as we can in the financial world, you have to have the plan that accounts for these factors and addresses them. And that's why we discuss it on today's program, is that the fear is real out there that Washington will wipe out Wall Street or the retirement prospects of millions of Americans. But we all need to have that plan in place. And so many across Northwestern Ohio have enlisted the help and the resources, the assistance of McIntire Retirement Services to formulate that plan, the game plan for retirement that addresses those issues. But so many more need to have that plan. So that's why Chris is here each and every week to remind you that you are capable of formulating the plan and then continuing to monitor and update it. And with Chris McIntire at McIntire Retirement Services, there's no cost or obligation to getting that plan put together, to answer and address questions, to look at the issues head on, and to make sure that they have been addressed in your plan. And if you'd like to take the time, take the opportunity to get that plan put together, pick up the phone, give a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. So Chris, I want to talk about all of those issues, but first and foremost, can you give us kind of your opinion, assessment, or some of the data? Does who is in the White House, or do elections really have that big of an impact on Wall Street?
Well, they certainly can. If we look at, we always have elections, so that's not really a surprise. It's a kind of the death by a thousand cuts. It's increases in taxes. It's changes in required minimum distribution laws. It's changes in capital gains taxes, changes in estate taxes, things like this that, might not affect, the value of a mutual fund that you have, but it certainly has an impact on how much of that value you get to keep in your pocket or when you pass it on to your family. We're in a fairly friendly tax environment right now. Tax rates are low, capital gains rates are low from a historic perspective. No estate taxes in Ohio. The federal estate exemption is very large right now for a married couple, where you'd need to win the lottery to essentially not have to worry about that. And I guess I would say that if the House of Representatives went very strongly to one party or the other, that could certainly have an impact on your investments because they have different agendas. Obviously the Democrats typically want to regulate a little bit more on the financial services side. I don't think that's not necessarily a political statement, and the Republicans would be a little more, I'll say hands off, if you will, from a regulatory standpoint. And because regulations cost money, and all those things slow things down as well. So, not to say that it needs to be the Wild West out there, but you can overregulate, you can underregulate. It's trying to strike that balance is probably what would be beneficial to all of us. And, I think today, as powerful as the financial services industry is, as the pharmaceutical industry is, so on, as the green environment movement is, you and I probably individually have very little effect or control over anything. I think there's so much more power in politics at play, above and beyond our capacity to do anything about it, to tell you the truth. And, just ask your doctor, who runs my healthcare? He would say your insurance company, and your insurance company would say big pharmaceutical companies do as well.
Yeah. Well, Chris, you hit on the question of taxes. I know that's a big one. That is probably our largest known expense in retirement. The taxes do not go away the day after we retire. We're going to continue to need to have part of our budget allocated toward paying the IRS, our due amount and fair share. But the tax laws can and do change. And so I know that you've been talking a lot recently about proactive strategies that savers and investors can enact and can execute on to help protect against the potential of taxes increasing into the future. And in fact, not just potential, as tax laws stand today, the reality that taxes are set to increase in just a couple short years.
Yeah, no question about it. The Trump tax cuts are going to expire. And I've been reading in some of the periodicals and newspapers that, what is the cost of those tax cuts, is like a trillion or whatever dollar number they're using, to the government. And it's like, it's not their money in the first place, right? You're confiscating somebody else as well. So when they say, these tax cuts cost the government. It's like, well, maybe the government should cut spending instead of raising our taxes. We're the ones that work for it. And that's I mean, because just look, they never cut anything. They just continue to spend. And then if they say, well, we're going to slow down the rate of growth, they call that a cut,
Yeah. Yeah, there are two sides to this, right? To any budget there's the income side and the spending side. And the government, Chris, does not manufacture any goods or widgets that they sell for a profit. They don't provide services at a profit. They collect revenue on the tax side, and then the spending side. It just seems like we are continually outspending the revenue that we bring in. I think the last time there was a balanced budget may have been early on in the 2000s, and perpetually we just continue to overspend. And that's why $35 trillion in debt, and then an additional, I think, 70 or 80 trillion dollars if you count the unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicare that we are projected to be in the negative on into the future. And Chris, this is why I think a lot of people are concerned about the reality of taxes going up into the future. What should a concerned saver or investor do right now if they are worried about that potential?
Yeah. Yep. A couple of things. One, they should really investigate, did the what was it? The Anti-Inflation Act or something like that, that obviously it was a massive spending bill. But, that's where we talk about Roth conversions, take advantage of the opportunities where we're at now and move money that's forever taxed into something that is never taxed. And, and understanding, okay, well, what dollar amounts do you do that in on an ongoing basis? And, because anybody can convert an IRA to a Roth IRA. Not everybody can contribute to a Roth IRA. My wife and I, are above the income thresholds where we cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. Okay, so we can put it into a traditional IRA and then convert it the next day. So there is a loophole to, to get us around that. And, that's one of the elements. And then, the tax efficiencies that, cash value life insurance offers is certainly something to consider, because there are many other benefits to life insurance, like, some of the long-term care benefits that are in newer policies, the tax-free death benefit. Structured correctly, you can use it as income in your retirement, income tax-free through policy loans. That's a concept that I use for myself. So, if it's good enough for me, it might be worth investigating. I'll say that.
Well, Chris, I know that we have a fear that the government can move the cheese, so to speak, as well. That legislative risk is the fact that we follow one set of rules, and then when we get to the destination, the government changes those rules or does something different. A couple recent examples of this, the Secure Act and then the Secure Act 2.0 over the last 5 years or so have been sweeping legislative changes that impacted and affected retirement accounts. Is there a concern that legislative change and tax law changes, the brackets, the rates, and so forth, could negatively impact those that have even been proactive and adamant savers and investors?
Yeah, I mean, anything can happen here, because a lot, like today, for example, if your parents have a big IRA account, or grandparents, whoever it is, and they pass away, you have to empty it within 10 years. So you might be doing your own income tax planning and tax planning and, all of those issues. And then all of a sudden you found out somebody just, left you a $500,000 IRA account that you have to empty within 10 years. Does that blow up your plan? So, those are legislative risks like you talk about. We talk about legislative risk a lot in the classes that I teach. And, and that is one of those examples is, what they've done to inherited IRAs. They've accelerated the payout rates on those. I would think that, many people look to the government to solve all the problems when we ought to be, pointing the finger and blaming them for creating some of the problems. Let's be honest. I mean, if some of these individuals were leading Nvidia stock, for example, they'd be out, or Tesla, they'd be gone because of this massive irresponsibility they have. And then to come back and point the fingers and play class warfare saying, well, we've got all these deficits. It's because the rich don't pay enough taxes. Like, well, the top 5% pay 95% of the bill. So that's the other side of the argument. 50% of Americans pay no income taxes, right? So if you want to talk about fair, I mean, and then they tax cigarettes and things like that, and exponentially. So, it's just it's a house of cards, I'm afraid sometimes, Peter. It frustrates me to no end that they don't deliver any solutions and they create more problems. The law of unintended consequences, probably, but you know.
One example of that, Chris, this continued and ongoing debt ceiling debate, right? It seems like every 3 to 6 months we hear about the government is facing some looming imminent shutdown, and then at 12:01 a.m. the day after that shutdown would have been enacted, they have this kumbaya moment and they come together on some level of reconciled spending bill to keep the government up and running for another period of time. It seems like, again, they're putting this Band-Aid on in the hopes that, well, our team is going to be in charge down the road, and then we'll really get to solve this issue the way that we want to, not realizing that it continues to be a two-party system, and there's always going to need to be some reality of negotiation and a give and take to truly address this question and issue amongst many others.
Yeah, and Peter, a good example is the Ohio Turnpike's about 20 miles south of where I'm at right now on Catawba Island. And when they built it, they started charging tolls to pay for it, and then once they said it was paid for, those tolls would go away. Now it's one of the most expensive highways in the United States to drive, and it's a good highway. I'm not bashing that, but it's a broken promise. They continue to raise those tolls and whatnot, and it puts more semis on some of the other road surfaces that destroys those road surfaces. And I lived in one of those towns in a little town of Woodville that, when they raised the tolls, all the trucks went on Route 20 and Route 20 became a piece of garbage, and, who pays for it? And, and I guess our point here, everybody, is, look, you've got to be proactive here in your tax planning, because if they doubled income tax rates, they just spend twice as much money. I mean, you never hear them talking about, we really need to get this under control. And both parties are to blame. So please don't email and say we're picking on parties, because both of them have dug this hole, and we blame them equally. And until we vote them out, this is what we're going to have.
What about questions about the solvency of the dollar itself, Chris? Are these unfounded concerns? And B, if there were problems with the solvency of the dollar, a new reserve global currency came about, what kind of impact would that have across savers and investors who have been saving in these investment and retirement accounts?
And Peter, have you been in my email? Because this is a couple of these that I get quite often. I
think I might get a few of the same, Chris.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, should we be buying physical gold? Because we all hear those gold commercials, and
incessantly
we have the discussion of that with our clients. And the dollar is only worth what we think somebody's willing to give us for it. That it says it's worth 100 pennies, for example. As the deficit expands, our ability to pay down those debts has an impact on what the dollar is worth. And it's funny because the dollar's, doing quite well right now as a currency. Oil around the world trades in dollars. Okay. I'm a hockey fan, and we have hockey in Canada and hockey in the United States. All hockey players are paid in American dollars. Okay. And that's just a hockey note there. Peter and I are hockey fans. So, is the dollar going to lose its luster as the world's reserve currency? Okay. Well, I think you could make an argument that, is the US's job to solve everybody's problem and to be the know-all end-all? Maybe competition isn't all that bad, because maybe we get our fiscal house in order if there's a threat to our currency, right? I mean, that's the other side of that argument. I'm a patriotic American. We want a strong dollar, but you'd mentioned that reconciliation, that they do these temporary funding issues. And we hear time and time again from, the military leadership that say it's really hard for us to draw out a long-term plan here for the nation's defense when you guys can't agree on funding for 90 days, only 90 days at a time. It's hard to put that stuff in place and do long-term. So, I mean, there is a lot of, residual impact that all of this has, from taxation to how efficiently we run our country to how we feel about our next door neighbors, right? I mean, I think most of us would agree that, civil unrest is probably the next page we turn if we're going this way, versus acts of kindness that should probably be promoted.
Yeah, I do have concerns, obviously, what we've seen over the last decade plus, and then what the day after the upcoming election looks like in the streets of America sort of has me scared. But more long term, Chris, it's not just this one next election, it's the elections for the next 20 or 30 years that's going to determine the solvency of our dollar, the stability of our country, and not just how much a single dollar buys, but the systems that depend on it, such as Social Security and Medicare. I mean, Social Security, the board of trustees have come out for many annual reports, and their most recent one said that in 2033 they'll only be able to pay 75 cents on the dollar of promised benefits that recipients are expecting, or that those not yet collecting see on their projections. How much does this play into the planning that an individual should do?
Yeah, well, it certainly comes into play. And I would think, we've heard the term means testing before, right? So means testing could be where they came up with a situation where they said, look, if your income's above $250,000 and you're over the age of 65, why should you be getting Social Security at all, right? That's what means testing would be. Or, do they start to tax 100% of Social Security benefits, where now the worst case scenario is they only tax 85% of it? Or Medicare premiums right now cost more for people with higher incomes. They could certainly, adjust those levels and capture more dollars because of the pitfalls there. And, they're not adequately addressing the shortfalls that two of these catalysts of American society, Social Security and Medicare, have had forever and ever. And I mean, just think what the stock market would do if you saw, both members of the political parties come out and say, you know what, we really need to address these. We're going to form a bipartisan committee, and, our promise to you is in the next 12 months, we're going to start addressing these issues. Think what that would do for people's psyche. They would see both parties working together, and I know we're here talking a little bit about politics. This is but government spending, something I'm pretty passionate about here, because it affects the taxation rates, right? If they were spending less money, maybe taxes could go lower and you get to keep more what you work for, right? Yeah. Peter, what is the tax cutoff date for most individuals now? Like May 15th or something? So you work from January 1st to like May 15th just to pay the government?
Just to pay the tax bill. Yeah, I was
think
talking about that the other day, that we got past the point where, okay, now we're actually earning money because everything we earned so far in the year is basically going to be the tax bill that we have for the year. It's crazy to think about that, Chris, but it's something that, again, we have to factor into our planning, right? And then we have to worry about these forces that are outside of our control, like the stability, the solvency, the strength of the dollar, the strengths of the systems that we depend on, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all government entitlement programs, that as they're called, but things that we've all contributed to, that we do depend on into the future for our financial security and stability. I've even heard, Chris, concerns that go as far as, well, what if the government confiscates the wealth inside of retirement accounts? The truth of it is that they don't have to, right? The same thing could be accomplished if they incrementally raised tax rates on these yet to be tax deferred IRAs, 401ks, and retirement accounts. Same thing with the collapse of the dollar, the weakening. That is, like you said earlier, the death by 1,000 cuts. It doesn't necessarily have to collapse all in one day. Inflation over time essentially accomplishes, it's not an accomplishment, but essentially achieves the same thing, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. You know, all of these instances that we're bringing up to everybody here today just makes that proactive tax planning and versus reactive tax planning. So, whether or not you agree with everything we've gone back and forth on here, folks, is just the ability for you to take control of your own tax situation and understand how much are you paying on each individual dollar you earn? What is the effective tax rate? Okay. And then, how much more can you pull out of your accounts and move into a Roth IRA that's income tax free that, hey, maybe you're better off paying the taxes now so that you can pass it on to your kids if that's your goal, right? Not everybody's goal is to pass their money down to their kids. They want to live off of it and, have the check to the funeral home bounce in an ideal estate plan, but a lot of people want to pass money on to their children. And, what is the best method to make all that happen so that you don't win the game? You're not leading at halftime, but you win the game, when the whistle blows at the end of the fourth quarter, or I'm a hockey guy, I'll say third period.
Well, Chris, across America, I think very reasonable people are very reasonably concerned with what's going on in Washington, many specifically concerned with the impact that the direction in Washington will have on the future outlook for our financial security, stability, and well-being. But again, the bottom line here, Chris, is that everybody needs to have a plan in place. Yes, there are going to be some factors that we cannot control: market volatility, taxation, inflation, legislative risk, by us as individuals, generally outside of our individual control. But the plan is going to help highlight and show us strategies and options to protect and insulate and isolate against those variables so we can better determine our own outcome. That's the goal of the game plan for retirement that you help savers and investors put together.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. And we love to analyze and help build, solid plans for folks, help them save more of their own dollars. Obviously, we want to help them grow their dollars as well from in an investment plan, safe money strategies, tax strategies, long-term care. Give them a little nudge to make sure they get the estate planning done, assist them in talking to the right healthcare person to get the right Medicare plan for them. So just kind of a nice quarterback there, if you will, and help people solve a lot of problems. And I think, we got a nice niche in the marketplace there. And, we help a lot of clients in transition when they're, when their spouses and whatnot pass away. And, that's when they need us the most. And I think we take the most pride right there.
We must take as much of the future into our own hands and under our own control as possible. That is the game plan for retirement. Doing so, determining your outcome, involves strategic, methodical, thoughtful, and ongoing planning, ladies and gentlemen. So if you would like to get your game plan for retirement put together, we always make one big offer to help you address these issues, and that is the complimentary review. If you've got a couple quick questions you'd like to ask directly, you're welcome to give a call to McIntire Retirement Services. But the true value is to get that plan put together. Look at your income, investments, taxes, healthcare, legacy, the risks that you're taking, the fees that you're paying, the taxes that you may be liable for into the future, identifying risks, issues, and opportunities. Pick up the phone and give a call. No cost, no obligation to get that written plan put together there with Chris McIntire and McIntire Retirement Services. 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. 800-868-1194. Or you can go online, McIntyreRetirementServices.com. McIntyreRetirementServices.com. Chris, I know that we've got a divisive topic here with anything talking about or having to do with Washington or politics or elections, but the bottom line is that we all need to plan. We have to have a plan for our own financial future, and I appreciate the fact that you are here encouraging people to take that proactive step each and every week.
Yeah, my pleasure. I hope everybody got a lot out of the show today. Thank you for listening so much. Everybody be safe and God bless.
Tune into Chris McIntire's full radio program and visit McIntyreRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris McIntire. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.